Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Mm.
And today we're going to be tackling something a little different.
Mm.
We're going to be exploring this fascinating world of social dynamics
Yeah.
and how they sometimes clash with our personal boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
Our source material today
Right.
is a Reddit thread that has got
Oh, Reddit.
everyone talking.
Yeah.
And it all started when a woman in her 50s
Yeah.
found herself in a little bit of an awkward situation at her niece's baby shower.
Ooh, baby shower drama. Okay, I'm interested. Tell me more.
So the aunt,
Right.
very excited about the new baby,
Of course.
instinctively goes to touch her niece's pregnant belly.
Okay.
And it's a gesture that, in her mind
Yeah.
is completely innocent and comes from a place of love.
Right.
But her niece,
Mm-hmm.
who's in her 20s,
Okay.
reacts in a way that surprises her.
Interesting.
She basically calls her out right there in front of everyone
Oh, no.
for touching her without asking.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting because this brings up, you know what this brings up?
Yeah.
This whole concept of bodily autonomy.
Yes.
This fundamental, right, we all have to decide,
Yes.
who touches us and how.
Exactly.
And what might seem like a totally harmless gesture to one person
Right.
can feel incredibly invasive to another.
Yes.
Especially in a situation,
As personal as pregnancy.
yeah, it's like we're all navigating these invisible boundaries.
Right.
And sometimes we bump into each other
And without even realizing it.
without even realizing it.
Yeah.
The aunt in the story is from a large, affectionate Italian family
Okay.
where touch is just a natural part of their culture.
Makes sense.
So for her, this gesture is almost automatic,
Mm-hmm.
a way of expressing joy and connection.
Right, I see.
But for her niece,
Okay.
who might have a different understanding of personal space,
Yeah.
or maybe even some past experiences that make her
Yeah.
sensitive to unwanted touch,
Mm-hmm.
it's a violation of a very important boundary. It's interesting how this generational difference is like a key element here.
Yes.
It really speaks to the fact that social norms around touch
Right.
and physical affection are
Constantly evolving.
constantly evolving. Yeah.
What was once considered perfectly acceptable,
Right.
like patting a child on the head
Mm-hmm.
or hugging a friend hello,
Yeah.
might now be seen as intrusive.
Yeah, especially as younger generations are becoming more vocal about their boundaries.
So this brings up a really interesting question.
What's that?
How do we navigate these
Yeah.
changing social landscapes,
Right.
especially within families,
Oh, absolutely.
where there are often
Yeah.
different expectations
Right.
and understandings of what's appropriate?
Yeah, because this aunt is like, wait, what?
She's like, what are the rules?
The rules have changed.
The rules have changed.
I
Yeah.
didn't get the memo.
Exactly.
So that's exactly the challenge, isn't it?
It is.
Like, we can't expect everyone to be on the same page when it comes to these unspoken social codes.
Exactly.
Because what's considered normal or polite
Yes.
can vary so widely
It really can.
based on age,
Yes.
culture, personal experience, even just individual preferences.
Right.
So how do we bridge that gap?
Well, that's what's so fascinating about this Reddit thread.
Okay, tell me.
It's like this microcosm of
Yeah.
different perspectives clashing.
Interesting.
You've got people who are firmly on the niece's side,
Okay.
arguing that bodily autonomy is non-negotiable
Right.
and that no one has the right to touch you without your consent,
Yes, regardless of intention.
regardless of intention.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have those who feel like the niece
Okay.
maybe overreacted,
Right.
that she could have handled it more discreetly,
Mhm.
and that maybe younger generations are becoming a bit too sensitive.
Interesting. Okay.
Some
Yeah.
are even suggesting that the aunt's cultural background should be taken into account.
Oh, that's interesting.
That in some cultures, physical touch
Right.
is a more common way of expressing warmth and affection.
That's a good point.
So where do you land on all of this?
Oh, that's tough.
Is there a right or wrong here?
It's hard to say because it seems like everyone's coming to the table
Right.
with valid points.
They are.
I don't think it's about, pointing fingers or declaring a winner in this debate.
I agree.
I think what's important is recognizing that there's this real tension
Mm-hmm.
between tradition and evolving social norms,
Right.
between individual preferences and cultural expectations.
Yes.
And the reality is there's no easy answer.
There isn't.
But this tension, this is exactly what makes
This is what makes it so interesting.
so intriguing.
It's like this one little incident has opened up this Pandora's box of questions
Yeah.
about consent
Right.
personal boundaries, generational differences,
Yeah.
and even the role of culture in shaping our understanding of physical interaction.
Absolutely. And we're just getting started.
We-
We're going to be dissecting all these different arguments.
Yes.
We're going to be exploring the nuances of this situation.
Yes,
Because what we really want to do is equip you with the tools and the insights to
exactly.
navigate similar situations in your own life.
Because let's face it, who hasn't experienced that awkward moment where a hug lingered a little too long
Right.
or a pat on the back felt a little too familiar?
All the time.
Yeah, we've all been there.
We've all been there.
And speaking of awkward,
Okay.
there's one more piece to this story
Tell
that adds
Yeah.
a whole other layer of complexity.
All right.
The aunt, feeling hurt and confused, mentions her Italian heritage
Okay.
and how her family is naturally touchy-feely,
Mm-hmm.
suggesting that maybe culture might play a role in all of this.
Okay, so that's a good question then.
So can we just chalk it up to cultural differences?
Right.
Or is there a deeper issue at play here?
Yeah. We're going to have to explore that and more when we come back.
Exactly. This is just part one of our deep dive
I can't wait for the next part.
into this fascinating topic.
Good stuff.
We'll be back with even more insights, expert analysis,
Yes.
and real-life examples in part two.
Oh, can't wait.
But in the meantime, if you're enjoying this conversation, make sure you hit that subscribe button
Yes, subscribe.
and like this episode.
Like it.
And if you're hungry for even more thought-provoking content on personal growth and relationships,
Yes.
head over to the Shauna Plage YouTube channel for tons of insightful videos.
So much good stuff over there.
We'll be back soon with part two,
Okay.
where we'll delve even deeper into the nuances of navigating
Right.
those sometimes tricky waters of personal boundaries.
I love it. Can't wait.
Right. See you then.
You know, it's fascinating how this seemingly simple interaction
Right.
has sparked such a complex debate about cultural norms and personal boundaries.
Yeah, and it's not just a theoretical discussion either.
Oh, absolutely not.
This thread is full of people
Right.
sharing their own personal experiences with unwanted touch.
Yeah.
And it's clear this issue really touches a nerve for a lot of people.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting is how this thread
What's that?
highlights this cognitive bias
Oh.
called the outgroup homogeneity effect.
Oh, what?
Outgroup homogeneity effect. And it's basically the tendency to see members of groups
Okay.
that we don't belong to
Right.
as more similar to each other than they actually are.
So in this case, it would be easy to fall into the trap of thinking
Right.
all older people are like this or all
Yeah.
younger people are like that.
Exactly. But the reality is there's so much variation
There is.
within any group.
Yeah. And this thread is a great reminder of that.
It
You see people of all ages
Right.
and backgrounds weighing in with such different opinions.
It's not just a simple generational divide.
It's much more nuanced than that.
Exactly. Much more nuanced.
Okay, so let's delve into this idea of cultural differences a bit more.
Okay.
The aunt mentions her Italian heritage
Right.
and how her family is very touchy-feely. Is it fair to say that some cultures are just more physically affectionate than others?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually quite a bit of research on this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, studies have shown that like physical touch and expressions of affection do vary across cultures.
So, for example.
Yeah, for example, like in Mediterranean and Latin American cultures,
Okay.
physical touch is often seen as like a natural way of expressing warmth and closeness.
So in those cultures,
Yeah,
a gesture like touching someone's belly might not even register as a potential boundary violation.
right. It's just seen as a normal way of interacting.
It's just how you do it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge those cultural differences
I agree.
and not jump to conclusions about someone's intentions
Right.
based on our own cultural norms.
Okay, so that makes sense. But at the same time,
Yeah,
even within a culture that embraces physical touch,
right.
there will always be individuals
Mm.
who are more sensitive
Yeah.
or who have different comfort levels.
Well, of course, which brings us back to
Which brings us back to bodily autonomy.
that key principle of bodily autonomy.
Regardless of culture or context,
It doesn't matter.
everyone has the right to decide who touches them
Yes.
and how.
100%.
Which means even if a particular gesture is considered normal
Right.
or acceptable within a certain culture.
It still doesn't give anyone a free pass
Right.
to disregard another person's discomfort.
Exactly.
So if someone tells you they're not comfortable with a particular type of touch,
Yeah,
you have to respect that boundary.
you do.
even if it goes against your own cultural norms.
Or even your own personal preferences.
Or your own personal preferences, 100%.
Okay, so let's say you're in the aunt's shoes in this scenario.
Okay.
You've realized that you overstepped a boundary,
Right.
maybe unintentionally.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best way to navigate that?
Well, a lot of the comments in the thread emphasize that a sincere apology is super important in these situations.
Okay.
But it's not just about saying, I'm sorry. It's about actually taking responsibility for your actions
Okay.
and acknowledging the impact they had on the other person.
So instead of saying, I'm sorry if I offended you.
Right, which kind of puts the onus on the other person's feelings.
Right.
It's better to say something like,
Right.
I'm sorry I touched your belly without asking. I realized that was a boundary for you,
Okay.
and I respect that.
So it's about validating their experience,
Validating their experience, exactly.
acknowledging that you crossed the line,
You crossed a line even if you didn't mean to.
even if you didn't intend to.
And it's also important to avoid justifying your actions
Okay.
or making excuses.
Which can just come across as minimizing their feelings.
Exactly, minimizing their feelings.
You know, this makes me think about how sometimes,
Yeah,
even when we apologize,
right.
we can still get caught up in defending ourselves
Oh, yeah.
or explaining our intentions.
All the time, but in those moments, it's really about
It is.
putting the other person's needs and feelings first. And a genuine apology can really go a long way
I think so.
in repairing a relationship that's been strained by a boundary violation.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that you're willing to listen to learn
Yeah.
and adjust your behavior to respect the other person's needs.
Okay, so let's flip the script for a moment.
Okay.
What about Denise's perspective?
Okay.
The thread also had a lot of discussion
Yeah.
about the importance of tone and delivery when setting boundaries.
Oh, that's a really important point, because even when you're completely justified
Right.
in setting a boundary,
Yeah,
the way you communicate it can make a huge difference
it really can.
in how it's received.
So while the niece had every right to say something,
Right.
some people felt like her tone was a bit too harsh or confrontational,
Okay.
especially in a public setting.
Especially in a public setting. Yeah, that's where
That's where it gets tricky.
those nuances of communication come in.
Yeah.
While it's important to be assertive
Yeah.
and clear about your boundaries, it's also important to be mindful of the other person's feelings
Right.
and the context of the situation.
So instead of a public call out, maybe a quieter,
Yeah.
more private conversation would have been more effective.
Maybe, or even a gentler approach in the moment.
Okay.
Something like, Auntie, I love you, but I'm not comfortable with people touching my belly right now.
So it still sets a clear boundary,
It does.
but in a way that's more likely to preserve the relationship
Exactly.
and avoid unnecessary conflict.
It's a delicate dance, isn't it?
It is,
Finding that balance between assertiveness and compassion.
especially when you're dealing with family dynamics and cultural differences.
Especially that.
But even though it can be challenging,
Yeah,
it's a dance worth learning,
it is.
because mastering the art of setting boundaries with grace and clarity,
That's so important
it really is.
for building healthy and fulfilling relationships.
And this thread, as messy and complicated as it is giving us a lot to think about in terms of how we navigate
For sure.
those complexities.
It really is. And it's a reminder that
Yeah.
even the most seemingly simple interactions
They can be.
can be loaded with unspoken expectations, cultural nuances, personal sensitivities.
Exactly.
So it's always a good idea to approach those interactions
Right.
with, a healthy dose of self-awareness,
Okay.
empathy,
Yeah.
and a willingness to communicate openly and respectfully.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into this Reddit thread, about pregnant bellies and boundaries.
Yes.
We've explored so much already.
We have.
The concept of bodily autonomy,
Right.
the impact of cultural differences, the art of setting boundaries with grace and clarity. But now I want to shift our focus
Okay.
to the emotional landscape
Yeah.
of these interactions,
Okay.
because when our boundaries are crossed,
Yes.
it can bring up a lot of feelings.
Absolutely. And I think those feelings are often
Yeah.
at the heart of these conflicts.
Mm.
We might feel hurt, angry, confused, or even betrayed when someone violates a boundary, even if it wasn't intentional.
Yeah, and those feelings can be especially complex when they
that?
arise within families.
Right. Because it's like
Yeah.
love and loyalty kind of intertwine
Yeah.
with those hurt feelings.
It's like navigating a minefield, isn't it?
It is.
You want to assert your needs and boundaries,
Right.
but you also don't want to damage the relationship or create unnecessary drama.
It's tough.
It
It's
is.
a delicate balance.
So let's say you're the niece in this scenario.
Okay.
You've been touched in a way that made you uncomfortable.
Right.
And now you're feeling a mix of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
anger, resentment,
Yeah.
maybe even a sense of violation.
Mm-hmm.
How do you process those feelings in a healthy way?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's so important to acknowledge and validate those feelings.
Okay.
Don't try to suppress them
Right.
or minimize them. It's okay to feel angry or hurt
It is.
when someone crosses a boundary,
Mhm.
even if they didn't mean to. Allow yourself to feel those emotions fully.
So instead of trying to be the bigger person
Yeah.
or brush it off as no big deal,
Right.
it's actually healthier to allow
I
ourselves
think so.
to experience those emotions authentically.
Yeah, I think suppressing emotions just leads to resentment
It does.
and can actually damage the relationship in the long run. So
Right.
you really have to give yourself permission to feel what you feel
I like that.
and then find healthy ways to express those emotions.
Okay.
Maybe that's journaling,
Right.
talking to a trusted friend, or even seeking professional support if the emotions feel overwhelming.
That makes a lot of sense because
Okay.
it's like we need to create space for those feelings
Yes,
to exist
exactly.
rather than trying to stuff them down
Yeah.
or pretend that they're not there.
And once you've processed those emotions,
Yeah.
it becomes so much easier to approach the situation
Okay.
with more clarity and objectivity.
Okay. So let's say you've decided to have a conversation
Okay.
with the person who crossed the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach that conversation
Yeah.
in a way that's both assertive and compassionate?
Well, I think the key is to focus on I statements,
Okay.
which allow you to express your feelings and needs
Right.
without blaming or attacking the other person.
Okay.
So instead of saying, you made me feel uncomfortable when you touched me,
Right.
you might say, I felt uncomfortable when I was touched without asking.
So it shifts the focus from blame to your own personal experience.
Exactly.
And it's also important to be specific about
Right.
what happened and how it made you feel.
Because instead of just saying, I felt uncomfortable,
Yeah.
you might say, I felt uncomfortable and a little disrespected
Okay.
when my belly was touched without my permission.
So it gives the other person a clearer understanding of your perspective.
Exactly. And that clarity can make it easier for them to empathize with your experience and adjust their behavior in the future.
And remember, even though it's important to be assertive about your needs, it's also important to approach the conversation with a spirit of understanding.
Understanding. Yeah.
Recognize that the other person might not have intended to cause harm,
Especially.
especially if they come from a different cultural background.
Yeah. Or have different ideas about personal space.
So it's not about punishing them or making them feel bad,
Right.
but about educating them.
Yes. And creating a shared understanding
Exactly.
of each other's boundaries.
You know, this is giving me so much to think about
Yeah.
in terms of how I approach these situations in my own life.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've definitely been guilty of minimizing my own feelings
Yeah.
or avoiding those difficult conversations out of fear of creating conflict.
And it's a common tendency.
It is.
Especially for women who
Yeah.
are often socialized to be peacemakers
Right.
and prioritize the needs of others over their own.
But as we've seen in this deep dive,
Yeah.
setting boundaries and communicating our needs clearly,
It's so important.
it really is essential for healthy and fulfilling relationships.
Absolutely. And sometimes that means
Yeah.
having those uncomfortable conversations, even when it feels scary or awkward.
It can.
But I think while there's no guarantee
Right.
that every conversation will go smoothly or lead to immediate resolution,
Right.
the act of communicating your needs authentically and respectfully
Yeah.
is a powerful act of self-care
I love that.
and can ultimately lead to stronger, healthier relationships.
So to wrap up this incredible deep dive,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways our listeners can apply to their own lives
Okay.
when it comes to navigating those sometimes tricky waters of personal boundaries?
Well, I think first and foremost, just remember that your boundaries are valid,
They are.
regardless of anyone else's opinions or expectations.
You have the right to decide who touches you and how,
100%.
and to express your needs clearly and assertively.
And if someone crosses a boundary, it's okay to feel whatever you feel. Anger, hurt, confusion, even betrayal.
Don't try to minimize those emotions or pretend they're not there,
Exactly. Give yourself permission to process those feelings in a healthy way.
whether that's journaling, talking to a trusted friend,
Right. Or seeking professional support.
and when you're ready, approach the situation with the other person
Mm-hmm.
with a spirit of understanding and a willingness to communicate your needs clearly and respectfully.
Focus on those I finish statements
Yes.
to express your feelings and needs
Right.
without blaming or attacking the other person.
And remember, even though these conversations can be challenging,
Yeah.
they're an opportunity for growth, understanding, and deeper connection.
And don't be afraid to seek support if you need it.
Yeah.
Whether it's from a therapist, a trusted friend, or a support group, having a safe space to process your emotions and get guidance can make a world of difference.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It really has.
It's like we've taken this one seemingly simple incident
Yeah.
and unpacked a whole universe of complexities around touch, boundaries, culture, the emotional landscape of human interaction.
It's amazing.
It's a testament to the power of these deep dives.
It is.
How a single story can spark such a rich and multifaceted exploration
For sure.
of the human experience.
And speaking of deep dives,
Yeah.
if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button
Yes.
so you don't miss out on future conversations just like this one.
We release new episodes every week,
We do.
covering a wide range of topics
So many good ones.
that are sure to spark your curiosity and leave you with plenty to ponder.
And don't forget to give this episode a like.
Yeah.
It helps more people discover the show
It does.
and join in on these fascinating conversations.
And if you're looking for more insightful content on personal growth,
Yes.
relationships, and navigating the complexities of human interaction, be sure to check out the Shauna Pelage YouTube channel.
So much good stuff over there.
We've got tons of videos that explore similar themes
Yeah.
and offer practical tools for living a more fulfilling and authentic life.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep those minds curious
Yeah,
and those
what is
hearts
it?
open.